Hello, my name is Robin Holzer. I'm a family practice physician, and I have a message tonight for you about your health. Now, mind you, I am not your physician, but just for educational purposes only. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got to be sitting here in front of you today. So my journey began in medical school in Albany, New York, and then I came down to Florida, where I did my residency in family practice medicine after doing an internship in internal medicine up in Albany, New York as well. And while I was doing my residency, I started to get sick. At first it was just rashes. I felt very tired, and I thought, well, after all, I'm a resident, and you're supposed to get tired, right? And after I had a cold one day, all of a sudden, every joint in my body was hurting. It felt like I was on fire. It was pretty awful. And we did some blood work and discovered that I had developed antibodies against my own body. In other words, my immune system had decided that my DNA was the enemy and was actively targeting it and fighting it off. This is called lupus, one of the many varieties of autoimmune diseases that are out there. So it's very similar to rheumatoid arthritis, which many people know as more commonly the more usual type of arthritis out there. But the story did not end there. What I did was, I was in my residency and I saw my rheumatologist, and they gave me some medications. I thought, okay, this is good. Got some steroids, got some medications, and they started to work, sort of. It never entirely healed the issue, but I could function and I could get through my residency and make it through the day. And medications made me feel sick, but, you know, it was better than the pain, so I kept going. And then one day, I was having dinner with my parents, and I realized I usually didn't have a lot of steak in my diet at the time, but my mom really wanted me to have a little piece of steak to go with it, and so I thought, all right, well, sure. And so what I did was I had the half a piece of steak, went home, and then I felt awful. Not at the dinner table, but a couple hours later. And I just kind of noticed, well, there seems to be something going on here. That I had this food and I didn't feel well after, but I really didn't make the connection entirely at that time. It wasn't until years later when I started to get a little bit more serious about learning how to control my own autoimmune disease, when I started to think there seems to be some relationship between food and how I was feeling. And so, sure enough, I saw some articles on anti-inflammatory foods. Dr. Wheel, for example, had a program, and I was reading about his work with it. And I thought, interesting. What is this idea about using food as medicine, and is it possible to control the immune system? And so I ended up basically looking at things that cause pain and eliminated them from my diet. And I decided to choose things that that fought pain, and thought, interesting, might be possible. And at that time, it was just a theory as to whether this would be working or not. And then, as happens often when people have immune system issues, I ended up getting a cold. And as anybody who's been on these medications knows, if you get a cold, you have to get off of the medication. And so I got off the medication so that my immune system could fight off the cold virus. And I just didn't have the heart to get back on it. I thought, let me give a try of this idea that was brewing and see, well. And I thought, well, if I go ahead and do this, I'd better talk to my rheumatology person first. And so I went and talked to a rheumatologist and said, this is my idea. I would like to, since I'm off of the medication anyway, I would like to try to use food as my anti-inflammatory source and just see what happens with it. And since I worked very closely with this person, they said, you know, if it was anyone else but you, I'd say no or heck no. But they knew where I worked, and the next step in treatment, I had already tried methotrexate and Plaquenil and Cellcept, and the next stage of treatment for me was going to be injectables. So I was going to have to sit here and inject myself with Humira every week. And of course, it's a very strong medication, and I would have had to wear a mask when I was seeing my patients. And so what I ended up doing was I eliminated all animal products from my diet. No meat, no fish, and so forth, no eggs. And what I did instead was I very specifically chose foods that were very anti-inflammatory. Lots of dark green leafy vegetables, beets, beet juice, flax seeds. In the beginning, I had seen something on how flax oil was anti-inflammatory, and it made sense because I knew about the pathways in which the immune chemicals were made at the very end of the pathway. You pour omega-3s into the system, and it pours out calm inflammation products. You pour omega-6s in, and it spews forth a very inflammatory thing. So the idea was you keep the immune system either tilted in a state where it's quiet most of the time unless it's got to fight something off, or you keep the immune system tilted in a way in which it is very inflamed and attacking your own body. And so that was the theory. And so the first week along, it felt very scary, but I seemed to be doing okay. There wasn't any joint pain, there wasn't any problems. And after a few months, I started realizing, holy cow, I'm actually doing this. I learned how to control the immune system through simple dietary changes. And a few months into what I was doing, I saw a very interesting video presentation by a gentleman named Dr. Greger. It was 2012. And about 10 minutes into the presentation, he had a talk about how they had fed a group of volunteers hamburgers, and they tracked the immune markers in the blood a few hours later. And they did not have a spike in the immune system stuff at the moment that they're eating the hamburger, but a few hours later, exactly when I felt my own symptoms with the steak, the level of inflammatory chemicals in the blood was at its peak. And then it slowly went down, and I said, holy cow, this is amazing. I have never in my life known of anybody that would explain to me why I felt sick when I ate certain foods, such as this. But there it was, and it made perfect sense. And I said, who is this guy? What else has he got? And I discovered his website, nutritionfacts.org, and he indeed has many, many presentations on other ways in which meats are very inflammatory, in which fruits and vegetables and whole grains and so forth are very anti-inflammatory. It has to do with pretty much everything in the body. When the diet is changed, the gut flora is changed, the skin is changed, your body is just getting soaked in these anti-inflammatory chemicals, and it can have a profound impact on health. So as I was healing myself of this autoimmune issue, I started to see ways in which this could also be expanded for other things. I've had a lot of success with my patients and being able to help them with rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Sjogren's, psoriatic arthritis, and so forth. Along the way, I discovered another website, nutritionmd.org, which has a summary presentation of about 10 most common foods that trigger inflammation and a list of foods that do not trigger inflammation. And in that website, I found it to be a very, very helpful tool in basically helping to cure my patients, one of whom did the elimination diet trial where she got rid of all of the items on the list, ate anti-inflammatory foods for about 4 weeks, and she told me afterwards, about the third week, she thought it was really, really tough, and she's like, why am I doing this? It's a pain. I've got to make these special foods, and she thought, well, it says 4 weeks, so I'm just going to keep on going for a little while. And she said something pretty amazing happened after about the 4th week. She all of a sudden noticed that she was not having any pain anymore. And sure enough, a few days later, she was completely pain-free. I had given her Mobic and other, anti-inflammatory medications to try to help her with her pain. And she said after that, she did not need any at all. And a few days later, the idea with the elimination diet is you get rid of all these things, and then a few days later, you add them back one at a time. And for her, she discovered that dairy, for her, was a trigger for her immune system. And she used to be in the habit of drinking dairy every day, a glass of milk for breakfast or cereal or something, for example. And she said instantly she became a soy milk lover. How did I know all this? Well, she basically went on and wasn't having any pain anymore, and so of course she didn't need to come back to see me as her physician. Until about 6 months later, she chased me down in the parking lot and says, "Dr. Holzer, Dr. Holzer." And I said, "Yes, how can I help you?" Because, I saw her once 6 months ago. I didn't remember exactly everything. And she said, "You can't believe how much you've helped me. I was crippled when I came into the office to see you. And now 4 weeks later, I was completely cured. And now, by the time she chased me down, it was 6 months later. And she just had a question. She wanted to know, would she be okay to move to Japan, where she ended up moving and has been completely symptom-free, essentially, since then. So anyway, if it can work for me, it can work for her, and it can work for you as well. So, all right, well, this is our introductory presentation tape, so I'm going to say goodbye for right now, and we'll see you again next time. Good night.